Welcome to the Attractions Group Podcast, episode 001. I'm your host, Ryan Sir, and with me is my good friend but better enemy, Don Helbig. How you doing, Don?
I'm doing great, Ryan. We talked about this for a long time, and it's great to finally get it off the ground.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We've been working on conceptualizing and working on this podcast for many months now, and here's the day when we're recording episode one. So that's really exciting. So let's talk about a little bit about how this podcast came to be. So our producer, David Detling of the Attractions Group, he approached you about starting a new show, but it wasn't this one. Why don't you tell that story?
Yeah, there used to be a show on WW Radio in Cincinnati. It was hosted by Gary Burbank. It was called Sports or Consequences. It was a trivia show. They would throw out questions, and whatever caller got the question right would win a prize. So David obtained the rights to that show, wanted to resurrect it through a podcast. He had reached out to me. He was aware that I had a broadcast background from professional hockey, doing play-by-play, and wanted to gauge my interest. I thought about it. I was intrigued by the idea. The concept, sounded really good. But then, I started thinking about it as a show and what Sports or Consequences was, requiring people to call in. You really can't do that with a podcast in terms of getting that audience participation. So that part didn't work out. But started talking, communicating with Dave a little bit more from that point on.
Okay. And then, David is an old business partner of mine. I used to own a company called Amusements and Attractions, and he and I did many dealings in the industry. And he approached me as well. And obviously, I've known you for a couple decades. Um, let's start off with this. For those of you who don't know you, what's your affiliation with the industry? Tell us about your professional affiliation.
You could really say it's about a 40-year association in one way or another with the attractions, the amusement theme park industry. Started out as a guest, but got involved in, riding a roller coaster over and over again. That became a PR angle. So I got to see really at that point in time how it worked from both sides of the fence. I was right in the middle, but I got to see from a marketing PR perspective how they used that to create a story, to create awareness, and also from my end, I got to see what the media needed from their end in terms to make this story work. So I got a little bit of an education there, just being right in the middle of it on both sides of the fence to see what each other needed to make those stories work. And then professionally, started 1990 in professional hockey in a media relations PR role. I've over the past 3 decades, I guess you could say, have been involved in virtually every aspect of marketing. I've done the advertising, I've done the group sales, I've done the strategic planning, I've done the PR media relations. I had been a broadcaster, and now today there's so many other things out there with social media and that. So I've pretty well rounded over the past 4 decades. I think one of the things that when I look back on, people ask me, what do you think your best achievement or something, like that is in the industry? What's your biggest accomplishment? I would say just being able to evolve with the times, because so much has changed, since I started. When I started, we were writing press releases on a typewriter.
Mhm.
That's how long I've been doing it. So just being able to evolve, and stay up with the times.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny to think about because if you think about, the mid '90s or so when you were involved in hockey, it was press releases and the AP press and stuff like that, and now it's tweeting and blogging and stuff like that. And in many ways, it's a lot more work, and in many ways, the technology does the work for you. So it's cool that you were able to keep up with it. So I guess I should probably cover my background so they don't think that you're the only qualified one here. But I've been involved with the industry for almost 20 years now, I would say. I've worked on many projects within. I've actually never been an employee of an amusement park. I've always been a contract guy. I've always owned my own company or just been done things on the outside, and then ran a fan site for a couple decades, obviously. And so I'm more of a marketing guy than a PR guy, and then you're more of a PR guy than a marketing guy. But obviously one exposes the other. So if you're interested in marketing or PR, then this is the podcast for you, my friends. So Don, do you remember when you first met me?
I do. I want to say there was a media day event, and I saw two or three of you running around with cameras, and just wanted to know who these people, were, because that was when it was first starting with a little bit of the non-traditional
Hmm.
media. When you started to have the websites that started to come into vogue, and I think that's when I first met you.
Yeah, so I remember knowing who you were because you worked for the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks hockey team. And I had season tickets, and they were about 2 rows in front of your broadcast booth. So I remember seeing you up there, but I didn't know you. Well, I knew who you were because of you're known in the industry and stuff. But yeah, I remember. If you recall that day, it was more. It wasn't so much they need interviews. It was more like we need warm bodies to fill these rides for the for the morning shows and so on. And then it rained. It ended up being a really long day because I think we got there at like 5 or 6 in the morning, and then we left at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Um, but I remember like it was such a long day, and then you came up to me in the parking lot, and you started talking to me, and I was like, because I didn't recognize you, and I was like, who is this guy? And then like, yeah, when I worked for the Cincinnati Gardens, I know who you are. So then you left town not long after. That's when you moved to, was it Albany from there?
Yep, Albany, New York.
Yeah, and then so we stayed in contact, would email back and forth a couple times a week, and now you're back, and now we're on a podcast to zip ahead about 17 years. So glad to have you here. I appreciate that you decided to take the opportunity to do this podcast, especially with me. I probably wouldn't have agreed to that, but so let's
But
dive in here.
Ryan, when you look back though too, in terms of agreeing to do this, is you get to be, at my point too, that sometimes you want to try to give something back to the industry and that. And I think one of the things I want to use this podcast for is to just talk a little bit about my experiences and things, and you know just offer some advice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I guess we should clarify the intention of this podcast. This is not a travel podcast. This is not a leisure podcast for the most part. This is an educational podcast that's going to be talking about the actual inner workings of the industry. How to be the most possible successful person in a role where PR and marketing is very different now than it was 5 years ago. Um, and one of the goals that especially Don has is that we are going to try to give you the tools for what's necessary to be successful if you are a recent college graduate or going into college, or anybody who wants to make a career out of the industry. We want to talk about what's necessary for that and what gives you the best possibilities for that. Okay, so the format of this show, and we are still playing with the format now, as I stated at the top of the episode. This is episode 1. So we are going to go into our subject matter now. And the subject matter is something that's very near and dear to Don because this is what everything is based off of that they do. And we're going to talk about brand journalism today. We're going to talk about defining brand journalism, how it differs from other types of marketing, as well as what you need to do to be successful in terms of brand journalism itself. So we're going to talk about that for a while, and then we'll go into the latest news and headlines and do our commentary on that. So, all right. So, brand journalism, Don. As a seasoned communication pro, what advice would you give a recent graduate looking to land their first PR job in the attractions industry?
I always like to look back on my PR career when I started, and this was more than 30 years ago, as we talked about earlier. And I compared to today's generation of communicators, the kids coming out of college and what they would have to do then. I mean, there's a lot of changes, since I started. There's more tools to master with all the technology that's out there. But the one thing that hasn't changed, Ryan, is you have to know how to write. And what I mean by that is you have to learn how to write well. That's very essential. It was back then. It still is today. You got to be clean, clear, concise today, and you have to be brief. Today more than ever, you have to be brief with what you're writing. Back when I was starting out, you would have press releases, 4 or 5 paragraphs. Now, think about a tweet and how much room you have, how much copy you have. You have to be able to communicate all
Mm-hmm.
that information into a tweet. So you got to be more concise. You have to be brief. You can't use a lot of jargon. You don't want to use the marketing speak. You want to write like you talk. That's one of the things that sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, I'm struggling as a writer. I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to start. Don't know where to end. Um, I think you're trying to get too creative, trying to squeeze too many words in there. Just write like you talk. And if you do that, you're going to be okay as a writer. So those are the kind of things that have really changed, over the years. But just the tools that are available today. Like I said, when I started, you had to know how to write well. You still do today, but you also have to master these other tools that are out there. The technology. I mean, there's social media. Everybody knows how to post on social media, but that's not knowing social media. You have to know the inner workings of it and how that channel relates to your brand, how you're going to communicate what, when, and where. Who's the audience on each different channel? Those are the kind of things you have to know. You have to know the analytics of social media, the analytics of your website. There's the strategy component to it. So there's a lot involved there that wasn't when I first started. So you have to know all of those things. You don't have to be great at all of them, but you have to know those things. You also have to know how to edit video.
Hmm.
That's important. You don't have to be great at, but you got to be able to do the basic there. You have to be able to go on camera. Uh, Back when I started, you might have had 3 or 4 people in the communications department. Each one had a different role. Somebody wrote the press releases. Somebody was the on-camera person. Somebody else was, doing this piece of it. But it's a smaller team now, so you have to be able to go on camera if necessary. So you want to practice that, and you have that opportunity to practice that a lot. So you have to be, comfortable being able to do that. So that's another piece that wasn't there when I first started, is going on the camera. Um, but just a lot involved with that you have to know before you get started today, that wasn't there when I first started. When I started, your way of communicating information was you had press releases. You would follow that up by calling the media, or you could just call the media to pitch the story. So those were your first two things. Or you had a press conference. That was the way the word got out. But today, there's so many different ways to do it. And you have your social media channels to be able to communicate that information. You have email. None of that was around, back then. So you have to be familiar and be able to use all these different channels to communicate the information that you have to distribute.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. One thing that comes to mind that I think of when it comes to social media is it's not that different from the real world in a lot of cases. If I wanted to if I wanted to tell you, let's say for example, um, that I'm your 15-year-old son and I'm asking you to pick me up from school tomorrow, do I say, "Hey, Dad, I know it's 3 a.m. and you're half asleep, but you need to pick me up tomorrow at James A. Garfield High School, which was founded in 1963 due to the, it's hey, first thing in the morning you're eating breakfast, you have his attention, Dad, pick me up. You know where to pick me up. It's simple as that. It's very concise. It's to the point. It's at a time when people are paying attention, and it's got to be accurate. So you're absolutely right about that. The jargon and stuff, and oftentimes like the sales message is something that you may have to admit. You can't always have a call to action when it comes to when it comes to these sort of messages. That's my thought with that. I mean, hey, we're gonna have the Harlem Globetrotters at our park. They're gonna be doing shows at 2, 3, and 5. You don't want to, muff that up with, oh, and we're selling season passes too. If people are interested in that, they know that you're selling season passes. That's the way I thought. Do you have any more thoughts on that, Don?
Well, it gets into we were talking about the brand journals thing at the beginning, but yeah, you want to shift the focus of the content from messaging to better storytelling. That's what
Hmm.
you want to do on your social media channels.
Yep, yeah, yeah, I agree. And again, if you're in the attractions industry, often it sells itself. You don't need to spoon feed that you're selling tickets or selling season passes. They know. So what's going on there? Why is this top of mind? Why is this interesting? Why is me, Jimmy, the 15-year-old, why is that of interest to me? Because I know that in order to go and see the Harlem Globetrotters, I got to buy a ticket or got to buy a season pass. But it keeps it short and concise and keeps my attention. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, one thing that I've noticed over it, because I've dabbled in some PR stuff. I feel like even in my time working in PR, it seems like the newsrooms are shrinking. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, they are shrinking. There's less people there that you can feed your information to. So it's a very crowded line up. Everybody's, submitting things to these news stations. There's only so many people there now to sift through it all. So that's where the brand journalism approach to your PR and social media efforts comes into play. Instead of begging the media all the time to cover you, and sometimes you have things that are, happening every weekend or something, and eventually they get tired of hearing from you anyway. So the best way to get your stories heard in today's world, the way it is with the shrinking newsrooms, is to become the media yourself. Become your own media outlet. Now, sometimes you'll hear, some PR and marketing people will say, well, we already are the media ourselves. We have a website, we have email, we have social media. That's marketing, that's messaging, what most of the you're going to see on a website. It's not storytelling, which is what brand journalism is. So, what you want to do if you're a PR person or a social media person is you want to cover your brand, your park, your attraction, as if you were a journalist assigned to cover that. And that way you tell your own stories. You want to be curious. You want to go out. You want to walk around the park. You want to find the stories. Some of them are ones the media would do. There's some that they wouldn't do, but your audience, your guests, they would love to hear those kind of stories, the behind the scenes stories, the first looks, those kind of things. And that's what brand journalism is just covering yourself like you're a member of the media. You don't have to beg anymore. I mean, there's so many distribution channels now. There's YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Those things, weren't around, several years ago, but they're there now for you to be able to tell your story, share your stories, so you don't have to rely on the media to communicate what's going on. But the other thing you want to do, though, is, and with brand, it's not about the social media piece of it as much. That's what I call rented land. You want to get people off rented land to the property you own, which is your website. But within your website, you want to create either a blog or a newsroom, and that's where these stories live. You want to drive traffic to your website. Now, when you have traffic to your website, you have the opportunity then to sell the passes, sell tickets, let people see the other upcoming events. Once they're there, they're going to move around. But a lot of times from social media, they're on to the next thing in their scroll. So you don't want to be reliant. You need it, but you don't want to be reliant on it. Just like you don't have to be reliant on the news media today to get people to know what you're doing at your park. You can use that brand journalism approach to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think that you gave me a couple years ago. You had an interesting thought that you told me that really kind of if you want to summarize your job or anybody that's in a similar position is you everything you do is just a road sign to the website, because the website's what sells tickets. You could argue the mobile app too, I guess, because that's become a little bit more prevalent for selling tickets and stuff. But there's two things. I mean, first of all, if you direct people to the website, then that's where you sell stuff. But let's, simple as that. But secondly, if it's your story, you control the narrative. You kind of hit on that. If you,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're building a new ride and you're talking about how exciting it is and how people are going to love it, they're just going to run with that. It's not going to be, you were building a new ride, but people kind of wanted something else or whatever. Again, you control the narrative, so it's your story. And with shrinking newsrooms, you're kind of doing the job for them. I think you might have actually said those exact words. So the easier you can make their jobs, the more likely they are to work with you. Would you
Yeah, and
agree
you
with
don't
that?
have to write a novel with your your blogs and the stories you're putting on your website and your newsroom or blog. They can be 2 or 3 paragraphs. They can be a lot longer in length, but you have to look at what would be placed in a newspaper today. What would be placed in a magazine. That's how you have to do it, but you do it yourself. You do it better
Yeah.
than what the media can do, because they're going to pick and choose what they're going to include in the story if you send them, a release or whatever. But this way you tell the story, your words, it's your expertise. And then if you're frequent enough with it, you start to develop people who will come to your blog or your newsroom regularly. They'll bookmark the page.
Right.
They'll check it out every morning. But you have to be consistent. And you have to give them, interesting stories. You can't make your blog or your newsroom, about products and, trying to pitch people. That's the key to brand journalism. It's not about pitching, it's about telling stories. And once you tell these stories and people, they become, interested in what's going on, you're going to rekindle memories, if it's something that past attraction, or maybe it's something that's brand new, but you get people excited, you get them remembering when they went to this place and they want to go again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But the cool part is you can make the website part of the experience. In February you can't go to you can't go to Six Flags Great Adventure, but if you go to their website, they might have a blog about something that's coming up in the summer or something that's going on now. Behind the scenes stuff, like you mentioned. I want to backpedal just a bit. You mentioned that there's a lot of confusion, especially internally in some cases, where people think, well, the brand journalism is the website, is the Twitter, but it's not. That's content marketing. Can you just clarify the difference between the two from an industry standpoint?
Well, there's a strategy to both. I mean, you're trying to reach certain markets, certain demographics. It's very similar to a marketing campaign, um, but it's taken it more of a journalistic storytelling approach, way of doing it. That's the difference really between the two. You're just shifting that focus of the content from messaging to better storytelling.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, what are some of the fundamentals that are necessary for adopting a like a brand journalism approach as opposed to just a typical content marketing approach?
The first thing, you hear a lot of times is, I've already got enough on my plate. I can't do this.
Hmm.
Brand journalism isn't about doing more. In some ways, it's actually doing less, but doing it better.
Hmm.
It's doing a better job of telling your stories with it. But you get to tell the story your way. Um, you control the message that's there. I think you mentioned that the content, it's shareable, it's discoverable. With SEO today, you write it the right way. Something you wrote 2 or 3 years ago is going to come up in searches, and it's going to help you drive traffic to your website and selling tickets and passes. Today, something again that's 2 or 3 years old, so it has a longer term use than just sending out a tweet or something on Facebook or even a press release with that. But the big thing too is don't PR the content. With a blog or newsroom, when you're trying to do storytelling, don't PR the content. Um, you're not going to see that. If you were a journalist writing for a publication, you're going to tell the story a certain way. Use that same approach as part of the fundamentals of creating a blog or a newsroom that people are going to want to come back to and read over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. So you kind of touched on that. Sometimes a story in the past will get dug up, and it's less that benefits more if it's done correctly. But um, what else do you have to gain from brand journalism over typical content marketing?
You're going to increase your web traffic, number one, with it. You're going to attract more and better media coverage if you do it right with brand journalism. Um, you're going to get more people to discover your stories by doing a brand journalism approach than if you just pop something out there on Facebook, Twitter. So really, I mean, there's so many different advantages of it, of becoming a journalist for your brand. Just take that approach, but you got to be curious. You got to get out. You got to walk around. You got to talk to people, and you got to find these stories. They're not going to fall in your lap either. So there's a little bit involved there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you buy 100 acres of land, you're not going to find gold unless you throw a shovel into the ground, right?
Right, but it's you do get to develop a following, and people look forward to it. They'll bookmark the page. They'll come to your website without being provoked. They're not seeing something else somewhere that's driving that traffic there. They're coming there unsolicited, and that's what you want. So eventually, you're not going to be as reliant on social media. You're not going to be as reliant on press release. You're not going to be as reliant on email to be able to get people to come to your website and find out what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, so speaking of which, we've talked a lot about like developing a following and the different aspects of it and how it differs from PR and content marketing and so on. Who would you say? eh, Give me like maybe a top five of the best brands in no particular order that do really good content marketing, like top of your head.
Well, I think when you're talking about the brand journalism approach to it, Disney Parks comes to mind. They've got lots and lots of contributors, and they're posting sometimes five, six, seven stories a day. They do not need to get their stories anywhere out there. They don't need the earned media. They don't need any of those kind of things. Everything that you need to know about what's happening at Disney parks, is right there on their blog. I think Coca-Cola, they do a good job with brand journalism, taking that approach.
The
Lowe's,
nostalgia with Coca-Cola.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
very good at
Lowe's
that.
does. Yeah, I like what Lowe's does. So I mean, those are the
Mhm.
three that come to mind that you look at, and they're doing it well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so any final thoughts about the brand journalism? Do you have any? Let's put it this way. If somebody is 22, 23-year-old recent college graduate, they want to do what you do. Give me no more than 2 sentence advice.
Well, it all comes down again to being able to write well and being able to write brief, but you also want to look at your job as being a journalist for the brand that you're going to be working for.
A little bit more than 2 sentences, but very good advice, Don. Thank you so much. Okay. So, do you want to move into news now, or do you have any more thoughts before we do that?
Ryan, I talked about the technologies different that everyone has to learn and master today. You go to parks as a guest and everything. How has that technology changed your behavior at a park? How do you use this, to consume information, to maybe navigate a park? What's changed for you over the last 20 years that you've been going to parks?
Oh, that's some very good questions. So for me, I'm a huge advocate of mobile apps. I love how you have a computer in your pocket and the computer can do almost anything, you know. So I think that park mobile apps are really, really leaning into the future, and it's going to be one of those things where the mobile app is part of the experience as much as anything else. If you want to use an example of Disney World, the mobile app is the My Disney Experience, which I think is either affiliated with Genie Plus now or was replaced by Genie Plus. But you order your food, you queue up the lines, the show times and stuff. So you don't have to look for anything because it's right in your pocket. It's an information piece that's right in your pocket. Um, I really like the idea of like the mobile wayfinders too. That's a business at Davidson. I've learned quite a bit about that in the past 5 or 6 years because you've got dynamic things changing. One thing that always bothers me, and it's a weird pet peeve, but if I see a billboard for the Garth Brooks concert that was in Cincinnati 2 weeks ago, now I think that's so like passe. I think that's so So the fact that it's like, oh, tonight there's a concert in our venue, or hey, bring a friend free this coming weekend. It's very dynamic. So the ways that you're communicated with are have changed greatly. And then from a guest experience, you get the latest information. You're more educated and you have a better experience as a result of that. And from a park standpoint, I mean, once again, control the narrative, and you have a greater way of communicating with the guests that are already on your land right now. Do you have any thoughts about that?
What what channel for you is the most important in terms of finding out what's happening at a park? I mean, whether it's Facebook, is it Twitter, is it the mobile app? I mean, what's your number one source that you go to find out information?
I guess theoretically it would be the mobile app. When I visit a park, often they have ride wait times and show times, which are the two biggest things. Um, so I check the mobile app. But as far as like dynamic information, I typically go to Twitter, I guess, because it seems like parks in general are more active on there as far as right now information. I prefer the formatting of Facebook, but it seems like parks, as you put PR up Facebook a little bit, so you have to dig a little bit further for the information. So if I'm if I'm at Dollywood and it's raining and I'm afraid they're going to close the park early, or I think they might close the park early, I check Twitter because that's where they're going to put that.
Okay.
Cool.
Ready to talk about some industry news that's been happening over the last week or so?
Oh yeah, it's the news is yeah, it never stops, does it, Don? Why don't you take the first story?
All right, new. It's called Bombs Away. It's a water slide attraction that debuted at Wet and Wild Emerald Point in Greensboro, North Carolina. I used to live there.
Hmm.
Wasn't there at the time when I was there, but when guests step into one of the two slides, the floor drops. It sends the riders down a thrilling ride. I love this kind of water attraction. What about you, Ryan? Is this up your alley?
Yeah, I like it because I did it once, so I broke my fear. But the scariest part is watching people drop. They're there and then they're not there. So it's definitely people pleasers. How many of these have you done, Don?
I've done three different types, three different places.
Yeah, I've done three as well. I think that they're I think it's cool because with the water slide, you close your eyes and you imagine a tube or a body slide or something, and this is different, and you really take it at full speed. It looks like the one in Greensboro is a little bit. It's not as complex. One of them has a big turn, and then the other one is more straight down. But I don't want to disparage it. I'm not saying it's bad because sometimes simpler is way better. And it might be way more thrilling to just take a big wide turn or drop directly down, as opposed to going through a bunch of different turns and stuff.
The
So
thing
yeah,
I like about it, yeah, what I really like about these kind of water slides is no matter how many times you do it, it's not the same experience twice. And there's no way, even though that floor is about to drop, there's no way you can prepare for that when it actually happens. So, I mean, the thrill, you never gets boring. The thrill is always going to be there.
yeah, I would say that more people chicken out on the capsule droppers than do on major roller coasters because you see it and it looks bad, but not that bad from the ground. And you get up there and people are dropping in and they're like, nope. I think every time I ride one, at least two people chicken out while I'm in line. So I think that's if you're going for high thrill, but you want to do water park, that's such a great route to go. So I hope they have a really successful season. It seems like across the industry, attendance and stuff like that is doing very well. So hopefully this is a real shot in the arm for that park because if it wasn't there when you were there and that was 15 years ago, it's relatively newer park. So good for them.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're seeing reports that the new Guardians of the Galaxy coaster at Walt Disney World is getting people sick. It might be the spinning action or the Florida heat, but so Fox 5 New York said since early previews started for the ride, lots of guests have complained about getting motion sickness after experiencing it, and this issue seems to have continued into the ride's official opening. This is coming from them quoting Inside the Magic. Epcot staff are reportedly handing out barf bags to nauseated riders. The screen-based ride rotates 360 degrees and launches in reverse. It is attracting big crowds and rave reviews from many fans on Twitter since it opened on Friday. So, Don, do you get sick from rides?
There are some, yeah. And as you get older, the spinning rides, make you feel that way. My daughter and her fiance there at Disney World as we do this podcast, and she said it was a phenomenal attraction, one of the best that she's ever experienced. She did warn me. She said, "But for you, Dad," she said, "I don't know if you'd be able to handle the spinning, aspect of it. You might feel a little sick." I think some of this gets overblown a little bit because it's the world we live in today with social media, where you might not have seen that 10, 15 years ago, those kind of stories. But I think it's just what your body can handle, and I don't think it's any different than riding any other kind of spin ride that's out there.
Yeah, I agree. Would you if you were in charge of choosing the rides for Disney World, would you take the heat into consideration? Because I've never really gotten sick from a ride before, but I feel like if it was 100 degrees and humid, like it is often in Orlando, that may be a contributing factor. I mean, if you're dehydrated anyway or something. I mean, does that matter, do you think?
I don't know that it would happen like that. I mean, you would see that on other rides if it was heat related that they have there. Even rides like the Dumbo attraction, that people do feel a little nauseous sometimes when they're going round and round like that. So I don't know that the heat's so much a big thing, but I think too, the more that people hear about that kind of thing happening or whatever, it puts something in your mind. You start to think about it when you go
I
through there.
my thought exactly, but my thought is people don't know it's a spinning coaster. And
Yeah,
then if they know that they can't handle that sort of thing, they may just be inclined not to ride it, but they don't know
right.
that going in. So I think we can agree
I
that,
would ride it though. I mean, I would do it, even though I know that I don't handle those kind of rides as well anymore. I would still want to experience that. So I don't put too much stock in those kind
right.
of stories.
Well, it
They're
also
just looking for things
it,
to write
it's
about it.
it's also not a scrambler. It doesn't spin the whole time. So
Right.
I really think that it's just people that can't take much of a spinning action. And when you have tens of thousands of people riding every day, eventually you're gonna have a couple dozen that get sick from it. Just
Yeah, I mean, the
statistically
math adds
speaking.
up right there where it says that's going to happen, and the more people you have riding it, the more it's going to happen.
Yeah. So I guess we're kind of agreeing that it'll probably solve itself, really.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Ryan, the new Walt Disney World store is now open on International Drive, bringing merchandise and ticket sales to the tourist corridor. I think this is a long time coming. Disney fans like to shop. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, and it's kind of an interesting take because they closed their many of their retail locations. I think all of them except for the outlets. According to Attractions Magazine, and a first for Disney, the shop also features an interactive Disney Vacation Club virtual discovery station where visitors can explore Disney theme parks, resorts, and Disney Cruise Line destinations across the world via floor-to-floor ceiling screens. Before we say anything, that's cool. That's really
It
neat.
is. It is.
Uniquely Disney. So I mean, do you obviously people that are down there don't need to know about Disney because they're there for Disney. Even if they're there for Orlando, or I'm sorry, for Universal, Universal's there because of Disney. Um, I would say that this is likely a draw-in for the Vacation Club, the DVC. What are your thoughts on that?
I could see that. Yeah, I would agree with you at that point. But in terms of you mentioned people going down there, they don't really need to know about it. I think if you're a fan of anything, Disney or whatever parks, you want to consume as much information and as many experiences as you can. So, I think no matter whether you're there, you're a super fan, you go 50 times a year. I think it's something that you want to see. You can't get enough of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know so many people that are just obsessed with it and they want everything Disney. Let me ask you this though. So along iDrive, it seems like it's less now. It was a bigger problem in the 80s and 90s. There were a lot of shops that sold Walt Disney World stuff that was clearly not authentic. And they would sell discounted tickets, which I'm not exactly sure how that system works if they purchased them from Disney and then just took a hit to draw people in or whatever. Do you think this helps or hurts? Because I'm kind of torn because part of me thinks that um, that's not the real Disney store. That's the real Disney store. On one hand, but on the other hand, if they've got a presence on iDrive, it almost adds legitimacy too. What are your thoughts on that?
It does add legitimacy to it, and all the different places out there, you're going to want to go to the one that's run and operated by Disney.
Do you think that people will be able to make the distinction on the outside?
Yeah, I do. I think they will be able to. I mean, you can definitely tell which ones, you know, have a Disney collection of things that they're selling, and which ones are operated by Disney. I mean, you can certainly tell, when a brand is involved in something and when they're not.
Well, especially Disney as a brand,
Yeah.
some of them are going to be Kmart selling $3 beach towels, and some of them are going to have ceiling to floor projections talking about Disney Vacation Club. I don't think it'll be easily replicated. I think some will be fooled; they won't know the difference. But I think that might be such a small, diminished fraction that it doesn't really.
No,
know.
and I think also when you're planning a visit there, you're going to research what else there is to do
Hmm.
around there, and you're going to come across that. You're going to put that on your bucket list to go do.
Now, it's been no secret that Disney's goal has always been to keep you on property. Do you think that this diminishes that, or is damaging to that at all?
No, I don't think so. I just think it's just another opportunity, for Disney fans to, shop, and it's another opportunity for them to, have themselves in front of people.
Yeah, I kind of agree with
Because
that.
if you're going down, I mean, you can't beat impressions, right?
Yeah, of course. Now, I mean, my main thought with that is, you're not going to get somebody in there where it's like, oh, what's this Walt Disney World that I'm hearing so much about? Like nobody's that dumb, you know. But at the same time, if they see that as an opportunity to sell DVC, we're down here, we're having a great time, we want to make this a thing. I think that's a huge opportunity. There's a lot of real estate on International Drive. International Drive is very busy all the time, and it caters directly towards the tourist. So I think it's a win for them.
Yeah, it just enhances, your experience during your stay. Just different things that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So hats off to Disney. I guess in November when we're down there for the IAPA convention, we'll have to check it out. So on to one of my favorite seasonal parks, Kennywood. So they removed the kangaroo. People got mad and they brought it back. How cool is that?
Very cool. I'm a big fan of the old classic attractions, rides that have been there forever. You always hate to see them be retired. Sometimes you have to because they just, reach the end of the line. But, I think there's always a place for those kind of classic attractions.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I haven't been to Kennywood in a long time, but I did ride the kangaroo, and it was very interesting. There's something about those older rides that really kind of get to you because it seems like maybe some of the newer ones are almost a little nerfed. Um, the old ones are, it relies solely on the laws of physics, and the kangaroo was one of them. So I'm so glad it's back. I'm so glad that they didn't scrap it or anything like that. I don't. What I don't know is if this was the plan, because this would be kind of a brilliant plan to announce that it's going away, take it away, and then give it back, and then you're the good guy again because they took a year to refurbish it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, attractions like that, what's great about they're multi-generational.
Hmm.
So, people when they were a kid, they rode it, and then their parents took them on it, and then now they're taking their kids and their grandkids and things on it. So that's what really makes those kind of rides great and a part of the fabric of the park that they're in. It's just that they're multi-generational, and I don't know what their plan was when they removed it, if they were bringing it back, if they were just repairing it. I don't know about that, but I'm just glad to see that it's back, and obviously a lot of longtime visitors to that park are too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right, Ryan, we've seen a theater production become movies and vice versa, but we've not seen a ride become a theater production until now, with Kings Island opening a new live stage show, Phantom Theater Encore, which pays tribute to the former Phantom Theater ride, which operated at Kings Island from 1992 to 2002. Have you seen the show? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I've seen it twice. So Phantom Theater is very nostalgic for me. That was the dark ride at my local park when I was growing up, and I cannot believe that they're doing this. I think that's so neat. Like, if it was my decision, I'd been like, yeah, that was 20 years ago. People probably don't remember it, and you're catering to people. No, they went for it, and it's packing people in, and it's funny, and it's not exactly scary, but it's spooky with some elements. It's beautifully done. It uses props from the old ride. It's got throwbacks. It's got little jabs and insults to the current ride that's there. It's everything I wanted for it. So Don, what do you think of it?
I thought, your thoughts was, I agree with it. Very, very well done. The costumes are amazing. Does rekindle memories of the ride. You talked about people not remembering the ride because of how long ago it was, 2002 since it last operated. But that's the beauty of things like YouTube, is a lot of these old attractions, um, they live there. And people go and watch it. They're 10, 11, 12, 15 years old. They're watching these old rides that parks had. It's like seeing the Brady Bunch. Kids today, they weren't around when the Brady Bunch launched, but because it's in syndication, they know every episode today, the 15, 16, 17-year old. So it's still relevant today. So even though they might not have experienced the ride, they know the ride, they're aware of the ride, and they're able to connect with it when they go in and watch this show, even though they never experienced the ride, they're still able to make that connection with the characters and the props and things like that because they've watched it over and over again on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah. You know what's really funny is going completely counter to my original intuition. Some of the people that I've spoken to that are most excited about it never rode the ride. They just heard about the legend behind it and stuff and how well done it was, and they've seen, like you said, YouTube videos and pictures and stuff, and they're loyal to that show. And I just think that's the coolest thing ever. So um, we've seen rides become movies. We've seen movies become rides. I don't think we've ever seen a live show become a ride yet. Maybe that could be the next one. But a ride becoming a live show is that oof, that's so unique, and I could not be happier about it. I'm so excited. So if you have the means, go see it. It's so fun. You mentioned the costumes, by the way. I don't want to breeze over that. That was what surprised me the most. I was concerned with how do we make people look like animatronics and not make it look stupid. They pulled it off. You can, and somebody that's very familiar with the ride that knew all the characters in it and stuff. Because for those of you who don't know, Phantom Theater had its own lore. It had its own characters and its own backstory and so on. But these human beings dressed up as these characters, I knew exactly which character they were supposed to be. That's how well done it is. So yeah, absolutely. See it once, see it twice, come back and see it again. I hope they do it again someday. I hope they make more dark rides into live shows in the future.
Yeah, really, really well done.
Yeah, awesome. Well, do you have any final thoughts, Don?
No, this was fun, and I look forward to working with you and David on these podcasts, and we hope everybody that tuned into this one, they enjoyed our conversation. And Ryan, want to tell them where they can find us?
Yeah, so you can find us on all of your favorite podcast apps. Just search for the Attractions Group Podcast, or on YouTube, search for the Attractions Group Podcast, and you can subscribe. For those of you who subscribed to my hastily made trailer that I needed to make in order to be registered with Apple and all the different things, I greatly appreciate it. We got a ton of downloads on that, so I really appreciate the early support and the faith in Don and the tolerance of me. So thank you so much for that. If you guys could help spread the word and share it on your social media, it would mean the world to us. So this is just a project that, as Don said, we're giving back to the industry that's been so good to us.
Yeah, and consider these first several podcasts kind of like test pilots for us to get a little bit of a feel for working with each other. We've never done it, work together before, so that takes a little bit of time to get that that cadence and that chemistry down. So the first 5 or 6, we're just going to be we're going to consider them test pilots.
Absolutely, and then for if you want to comment, leave reviews. 5-star reviews would be very helpful for getting our podcast up. But if you want to reach out to us, our Twitter handles are on the screen. Mine is at Ryan Suhr, RyanSuhr. That's SUHR. I always have to repeat that. RyanSuhr. And then Don Helbig's is way easier, at Don Helbig. Obviously, all one word and nothing in between. And if you have any feedback, positive or negative, absolutely let us know. Again, we're playing with the format. So we really greatly appreciate it. As Don said, the first several are going to be us playing with the format. We intend to be in full swing at or before November. So we're gonna do some big stuff for the IAAPA convention. So we're gonna be at 100% by then. So again, thanks for bearing with us. If you could spread the word, it would be fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. So that's our show. So this was episode 1 of the Attractions Group Podcast, and you made it to the end. Thank you so much. So this is Ryan Suhr with my colleague Don Helbig signing off.